Today we're going to talk about Selmer Sopranino production, from the very earliest beginning up to the end of 1999. Sopranino production is a little different from most other types in that its development ran on a very separate timeline. There are no known examples of a Series 1922. The very first Sopranino that I've seen is a 1900 serial number and stamped as a Model 22. It had a range only to high E flat, and it did not feature the bis B flat key. Next, it appeared in the mid 4000 range, stamped as a Model 26, but no apparent changes. There were a few changes made at the end of the 4000 serial range, in the 4900 range, and interestingly there were no model stamps on these instruments, but they had a few tweaks to the development, including adding the bis B flat key. Then at serial number 5000, this is where the archive records start, so I'm able to have much more information. There were at least 3 batches of Sopranino production, all in the 5000 range. So that we know that there were somewhere up to 18 instruments produced. The next Sopraninos appeared in the large bore era, in the 10,000 serial range. Now there was no change in design to the Sopranino. They did not have a model stamp on it. So for simplicity, I call these large bore era, in that they were built during the large bore time, but they were essentially the same as a Model 26 without the model stamp on them. There were 3 additional production batches in the 11 and 12K range. A total of 18 more instruments were made. There were no Sopraninos built from the 12 to the 24 serial number range. So there's nothing during the Super Sax era. There was 1 production in the 24 range. Then there were a couple built in the 31,000 range and a couple built in the 34,000 range. These appear not to be full production batches of 6, but may have been leftover or bodies that were started and were finished at that time. I call these balanced action era Sopraninos, but they still are essentially the same design as previous. By 40,000, there were some design changes. The octave mechanism was moved around, and the keys on the right-hand side, the B flat and C side keys, were made a little more ergonomic, and there were some small improvements. In the Super Action era range, there were 4 production batches made, so approximately 24 instruments would have been built. Now this is where it gets interesting. The next batch was built at 54,000, but there was no design change to indicate that it should be called a Mark 6. In fact, the earliest Sopranino stamped as a Mark 6 was not until, get ready for this, the 345,000 serial point. So essentially, from 40,000 to 345,000, I consider the Sopranino to be a super action model, not a Mark 6. The next development is at around 190,000. Some models were introduced with a range to high F sharp. So these were produced in conjunction with high E flat Sopraninos from 190 to about 298. Production is roughly equal between the 2 types. The latest I have seen with a range only to high E flat is at 298, but there may be some examples into the 300 range. Starting at around 351, the Mark 6 stamp appeared on the Sopraninos, but there was still no major design change. The next major redesign, or the only redesign of the Sopraninos, happened. There were prototypes around the 411 and 415 range, with production starting at 426. This was a radical redesign with Mark 6 style left pinky keys, raised left palm keys, essentially a complete remake of the instrument. Now this was not marketed as a Mark 6 or a Mark 7, which there were none, or even a Super Action 80, there were none of those as well. It was marketed as a Super Action 80 Series 2. So Super Action 80 Series 2 started at a 426 and continues until this day. So just to review, the balanced action design was from 31 to 34,000, minor changes from the previous. The Super Action design was from 40,000 to 345,000. The Mark 6 design stamped as a Mark 6, but no change from the previous, was from 351 to around 426. And then the Super Action 80 Series 2 was from 426 to today. In terms of total production, pre-war production, including an estimate of what was built before the archives start at serial number 5000, I estimate as many as 60 sopraninos were built. During the Mark 6 era, 55,000 to 240,000, there were about 390 sopraninos built. In the Mark 7 era, again, still the same Super Action design, this is from 240 to 317, there were about 370 sopraninos built. During the Super Action 80 Series 1 era, which is 1980 to 1985, there were about 85 sopraninos built. And then the redesigned sopraninos after 1985, there's another 390 or so built to the end of the 20th century. So total 20th century production of the sopranino would be in the range of 1,330 examples. Current production of the sopranino continues at somewhere around 20 to 30 units built per year. So theoretically, from 1922 until today, there could be as many as 1,800 sopraninos built. For a breakdown by the finish of the instruments, the vast majority were lacquered. Over 1,100 of them were lacquered. There was about 120 silver-plated, and I believe there's 26 that were lacquered with silver-plated keys. If you're looking for a really rare example, there are 5 examples of colored lacquer sopraninos. 4 of them are black, and 1 is white. So if you're looking for a really rare example, go for that one.